Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you underground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We had enough
of all the money you were making.
We had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We had enough.
This is a proclamation. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. You better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you're breaking.
We had enough.
All the money you're making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is the proclamation. We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice. We've had enough. Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price. We've had enough. Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What?
We've had enough. So many gone. How can we fill the void?
How can we feel?
We've had enough.
Void?
John Crawford, I know you've heard. We've had enough. Sandra Bland, come on and take a stand. We've had enough. Sean Bell, what the hell? We've had enough. Freddie Gray, did you hear what I said? We've had enough. This is a proclamation.
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. I see my friend Mickey Moore is here. Mickey, how you doing, man?
Fantastic, Al. Thanks for having me back.
Good to see you. I expect others will be joining us as we go, but I'm glad that you're here. And as always, I want to say that our intent every Monday is to talk about issues on the ballot and candidacies on the ballot for the upcoming November general election, both in the city of Minneapolis and for, I think, some races in St. Paul as well. You are a candidate for city council in your ward. I want to begin by once again inviting you the opportunity to introduce your campaign, your mission, your vision, and to ask listeners, viewers, and readers to vote for you.
Well, thanks again, Al, for having me back. I just really appreciate this opportunity. I love this forum. It really gives, it's of all the things that I participate in, this is really the most grounded, realistic conversation of on-the-ground ideas and issues that I have the chance to get involved in. Because we talk about everything. We go all around the city. We talk about news of the day. We talk about global issues sometimes. And it's just really a great opportunity. I'm really looking forward to being a part of it, in the future. Hopefully I get elected and represent Ward 9 and the city council. I promise I'll be a regular part of your show whenever you want me. Let me just
Well,
talk for a
before
moment.
you do that, people can see, ask, they may be wondering what I'm doing here. I'm actually sharing this to my groups and networks. And so I want to invite anybody that's listening or watching or connected to this to do the same. Let your networks know that this conversation is taking place right now, and invite people to check it out on YouTube or on Facebook, Facebook Insight News, or Facebook Black Press USA. And tell your friends to jump in this conversation, to raise questions, ask questions, provide ideas, to be part of what we call a robust conversation. Mickey Moore, go ahead.
Yeah, I get stopped all the time from people that say, "Oh yeah, I saw you on Al's show," and it's really got a fantastic reach. Whether I'm in North Minneapolis, I'm downtown, I'm in South Minneapolis, people sometimes that I don't expect. Sometimes people have preconceived notions about who listens in, but really, I get conversations about this show basically, wherever I go. And it's really important that we remain accessible as government officials, elected officials. It's interesting because one of the things that I learned about Ward 9 by talking to so many people early on, this is back in December and January, is that they absolutely feel completely disconnected from government. And I had no idea it was as bad and as serious as it was. I obviously understood the public safety issues and the concerns that people had regarding that. Obviously, as a 30 years long small business owner in this city, I absolutely knew about the economic devastations that our business districts and commercial corridors were going through. That was clear. That's something you see on the street, with your eyes. You see the storefronts closed up, boarded up. You see the broken glass on the ground. You see the burnt out shells of buildings. You can see the business devastation. It doesn't even look like Lake Street. But what I didn't know until I talked to people in their homes, in their apartments, on the ground, in the parks, walking around, was that they are fed up with the lack of responsiveness that our elected officials are showing our residents and voters. And that's something I really vow to change immediately. One of the things I'm going to do is something that's not been done in this city for a long time, and that is open a local ward office right in our ward, so that people don't have to go downtown. They don't have to make an appointment. They don't have to get dressed up in a fancy suit and try to go see somebody at City Hall. They can come and see me, some member of my staff, or just some community resource that is available to them right here in our local ward office any day of the week, no appointment necessary. If they want to critique how we're operating, if they want to add some suggestion or idea for something we can do better, if they're looking for a service, a program, a resource that our city, our county, our state is supposed to make available for people, they'll be able to find it right there in their home, their local neighborhood. They can just walk to our local ward office and get the access to those kind of services and programs that they've needed. It's one of the things that our city has really fallen down on. We've really missed a great opportunity. A lot of people don't realize we already have a lot of programs. We talked about business revitalization. There are funds available, whether they are city, county, state, or federal stimulus and restorative funds available for our businesses that are available right now, but people don't know how to access them. They don't know where to access them. A lot of the businesses in the Ninth Ward are small mom and pop operations. Some are minority owned, some are immigrant owned. A lot of people don't have the experience and the level of nuance that it takes to navigate some of these bureaucratic programs and resources. But I do, and I can make sure that people on our staff understand how to help people get from point A to point B, whether it's business assistance, whether they want to open a new business, whether they're looking for rental space, whether they're looking to access daycare programs, whether they're looking to higher education issues, whether they're trying to partner with some of our trade and union groups that are actively trying to hire and recruit more people. Whatever it is, we need to provide a place where we're kind of hubbing our partnership between government services and our public-private opportunities that exist for people, and just really working harder on a regular basis, on a kind of a functional day-to-day basis, to get people the help that they need. That's one of the elements of our government operation that's really been sorely missed. And we really need to change our priorities in government and focus more on attaching the services and programs that we have to the end user. We can't just expect that people are just, oh, well, we posted it on the website. Hopefully people are going to see it and be able to get to it. or well, we made the program available. We've got the budgets. We've allocated the money. Hopefully, people are going to be able to take advantage of it. Money goes unused. Resources go untapped. And we're really missing some of the lowest hanging fruit opportunities in our city to take care of some of the very simplest problems.
How can that happen? How can money go unused when the needs at the street level, at the residential level are so great, so obvious, particularly in Ninth Ward? And then, Mickey, take a minute to once again acquaint our readers, listeners, viewers with the boundary. What is the Ninth Ward, and who makes up that ward? What's the demographic profile of that ward?
Well, Ward 9, I'll start with your second question. Ward 9 is the most diverse ward in our city. It stretches from 35W, that freeway is the western boundary, all the way up to Minnehaha Avenue on the east, and from portions of 24th or at least Lake Street all the way out to 36th Street or even 38th Street in some portions. It's really been gerrymandered and kind of Jimmy rigged to kind of fit a particular pattern. That's why Little Earth housing has been included in the Ninth Ward. It's why George Floyd Square has been purposefully included in the Ninth Ward. It's why Chicago and Lake Street was a boundary for the Ninth Ward. It's been very kind of publicly produced, kind of inorganically and artificially produced to include a large segment of our Latino population, a large segment of our East African population, a large segment of African American and white populations. I mean, it's where, sadly, the ground zero level issues of like homelessness, drug use, substance use, and overdosing, sex trafficking, homicides are at an all-time high in Ward 9. It's just one of the wards where they have confined a lot of problem areas to our ward, and there's just no way around it. There's no way of trying to sugarcoat the fact that a lot of elements of Ward 9 are very, very. We've got difficulties. We've got needs. That have gone unmet for many, many administrations. I mean, things are worse now in Ward 9 than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But it's not that we can't fix these problems. We can. We absolutely can. We need to target our resources, and we especially need to bring in people that have the real world experience, that know how to effectively transition our programs and our resources into meaningful public policy and solution-oriented end results. That's why I'm so hopeful that my 30 years of small business experience in Minneapolis is going to really play a center point of the work that I do in trying to restore and revitalize all of our business districts and commercial corridors.
What work would you describe as effective or ineffective of the current office holder? You have an incumbent that's not running again, correct?
That's right. Alondra Cano was the city council representative in Ward 9 for 8 years. So she successfully won 2 terms here. And,
How would you characterize her work, her service?
Well, it's a great question. I'll try to do it factually rather than, use my personal opinion.
Well, do both. Do both. I mean, I'm interested in knowing just how you feel about it and how you think other people feel. You may say that a lot of people feel she did a great job. She was a wonderful person. She was a communicator. She was effective. Or you may say something different, but I'm actually interested in how you feel. And if this were like 2 guys just talking, what would you tell me?
Well, I'd like to just let kind of the facts speak for themselves. I mean, our ward has a much worse homelessness problem than we had before. We're in the middle of this very divisive public safety conversation, not the least of which the reason is because of several city council members, I think 9, who stood up in Powderhorn Park after George Floyd was tragically murdered and called for the abolishment, the defunding, the dismantling, the getting rid of our police department. That created a rift in our area of public messaging, of a kind of a way of thinking. Are we supposed to support the police, or are we supposed to be against the police? And that kind of negative messaging, that kind of unhelpful and counterproductive messaging is persisting today. And it's one of the reasons why we really can't even go forward on solving some of our problems until after we have this election and this ballot initiative on public safety, the ballot initiative number 2, has been voted on, and we can say, okay, this is how the people of Minneapolis have voted, and now we can move forward in one direction or the other to try to solve that particular problem. But aside from that, there are issues of drug use, drug and substance abuse that have gone unmet. There's this issue of our streets just being so dirty. Our streets, not all of them, it's neighborhood by neighborhood, Al. That's one of the things that's it's disappointing, but it's also critical to understand properly. Neighborhood by neighborhood, some streets are such a mess, it literally looks like somebody dumped a garbage can out all along the street. I mean, it's literally just garbage everywhere. And we're talking about broken bottles, all kinds of broken glass, used needles, stuff that I don't even want to describe, on camera, just filthy garbage. And you've got residential areas, business areas, there's kids over there. And this is at a time when we don't have enough youth jobs programs. We can't match a youth jobs program up with a cleaning up the streets program and get 2 problems solved at once. There are solvable issues. We haven't resolved the George Floyd Square issue. Again, 9th Ward, this is a leadership issue. This is the kind of thing that you say, well, why am I electing somebody to help us in the 9th Ward? Because sometimes we have problems and sometimes we need to come up with solutions. But here we are with nothing but problem after problem, and we can't come up with the right solution. So I would just encourage people to look at the facts on the ground. I would describe anybody's success or failure as a measurable, quantitative, independent assessment of, are the problems better than they were before, or are they worse than they were before? And you can't be held responsible for something like COVID-19, but you can be held responsible for how hard you work to actively match businesses up with the solutions that exist for them. I mean, we have programs that can provide restorative funding for some of these businesses, replace their storefronts and windows, get the boards off of their buildings, replace their broken glass, provide funding for an advertisement and marketing. Aside from the fact that public safety is the number 1 preventative issue regarding our businesses. We could spend millions of dollars beautifying the storefronts, but if people are afraid that there's going to be some kind of a mass shooting, 14 people shot just over the weekend, not in Minneapolis, but in St. Paul. But if that's the mindset and the perception that people have about going to a commercial district and trying to engage in having a good time, go to a restaurant, go to a movie, go out to eat, whatever you want to do, if that's the perception that people have about coming to the city, no amount of money is going to change that or make that go away. So we need to solve our solvable problems, whether it's public safety, whether it's accessible government, whether it's getting the resources into the hands of the charities, the nonprofits, the organizations that are actually functionally having an effect on the ground. I mean, there are groups out there, organizations that are actually solving the homelessness problem. They're taking people and transitioning them from homelessness into affordable housing. But we're not supporting them as a city government. We're trying to take the credit for solving the homelessness problem on our own instead of just supporting the groups that are actually getting the work done. We need to change our priorities and start thinking solutions first and worry about political grandstanding some other time. Maybe let some other generation do the political grandstanding. We cannot afford that right now in Minneapolis. We need real problem solvers and people who care more about solutions than they care about their own personal agenda or their party politics or supporting some grander kind of ideal that it's just not the right time for right now in Minneapolis.
How many people are in the race in that ward, in Ward 9? And how do you distinguish yourself from competitors? And what I'm looking for is a sense of, on a spectrum of strategies, sort of generally accepted strategies and approaches, how does the Mickey Moore strategy concept line up against competitors? I don't want you to sell votes for anybody else but you, but I do want you to distinguish yourself from any others.
Well, Al, one of the reasons why I'm running in the 9th Ward, aside from the fact that this is my hometown, I've lived in and around the 9th Ward for 38 years. My first business, my first braid factory location was on 31st Street. My second braid factory location was on Lake Street. My fifth braid factory location was on Chicago Avenue. I've had businesses where I specifically worked with the immigrant-owned operations selling international phone cards, and worked with them all up and down Lake Street in Chicago and Hiawatha, University Avenue too, and other places of the city. But it's just one of the core neighborhoods that I have been working with over the course of my business career. So that's 3 decades. I really care about the Ninth Ward. And when I see the lack of professionalism within the scope of candidates that were available, it just was really shocking. The lack of experienced leaders that we have for a ward as critically affected as the Ninth Ward. It can be very easily argued that the Ninth Ward was the most disproportionately negatively affected ward in our city, because not only do we have the most small businesses, the most minority-owned businesses, the most immigrant-owned businesses that were negatively affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, this was the seat of the civil unrest. It was Lake Street that was really targeted for the civil unrest. It was the Ninth Ward that had the George Floyd Square incident. It was the Ninth Ward that lost its police station, which was the busiest police station in the city. So the Ninth Ward has really been hammered. A lot of people don't realize that the Ninth Ward also had a tremendous amount of road construction. Lake Street was destroyed for about 6 months. This really caused businesses a tremendous amount of devastation. So it can be argued that the Ninth Ward is the most critically affected ward, and we absolutely need the highest level of professional and responsible and disciplined and mature leadership of any ward in our city. It's not an opportunity for us to take some gamble on some inexperienced or underprepared person that doesn't have any real world experience, that doesn't have any experience as a business owner, that doesn't have the kind of experience of just living in this area and putting their children to school or raising their family, owning a home, doing the types of things that I've been doing for the last 30 years. And so I really feel compelled to lend my long list of experiences and skill sets to try to articulately advocate for the very serious and specific needs of this community right now. I mean, I'm in a lucky position where I will be able to funnel a large portion of the excessive city council salary directly into opportunities that matter for our local residents and business owners. For instance, that local ward office. I'm going to have to pay for that myself. I'm going to have to take that out of my own salary and use that to pay the rent, pay the staff, and pay the bills for that local ward office. The city's not going to pay for it for me. It doesn't come free or cheap. But it's something I'm in a position to do. Other candidates are not in a position to do that. And let me just lastly say this. Being born in the 5th District, being born in South Minneapolis, I share all the same lifelong core democratic, progressive, and pragmatic values that we all kind of share. You know, a sense of tolerance, equality, a commitment to social justice. But what sets me apart from other candidates is that I don't bring my own personal politics into my policy making. I don't think that's appropriate, especially in a municipal city government. We need to separate personal politics, personal agendas, and most importantly, personal experiences out of our emotional basis for crafting policy. I will never use my own personal experience or personal feeling about an issue to dictate our community's needs and our community's agenda. I will always put what our community agrees on and the consensus opinion of the residents and business owners of the Ninth Ward as the foremost priority of how I operate. I'll never say, oh, well, I think it's this way. I have this personal attitude about this subject, and so I'm going to operate with that in mind. That's just not the way I do business. It's not the way I operate, and I think it's bad politics.
Mickey Moore, I think that, and you set this question up, South Minneapolis, George Floyd Square, the ward that you're seeking to represent has not only a significance in and of itself for the residents, but it has a global significance. And I want you to speak to that in as much as some of the people are connecting to this program through our Black Press USA Facebook initiative. And there may be people from around the world that are connecting that want to know that at one level or another were moved by the George Floyd murder and the city and the community's response to it. And as a lifelong resident of South Minneapolis, as a person that lived in the neighborhood and that now seeks to represent that neighborhood, that ward on the city council of Minneapolis, reflect on, if you would, what the George Floyd incident meant, not only just locally, but beyond that, give it whatever global consideration you think it has mushroomed into as well. I don't know if it's a good question or not, but I'm interested in how you understand the world's assessment of what happened in your neighborhood.
Well, I mean, to bring it home, and I know, Al, you know this already, but I was so moved by the George Floyd murder that the very next morning, I was in line at the Secretary of State's office registering as a candidate for United States Congress. I have never been involved in politics before. I don't like politics. I stay out of politics. But I absolutely, through my long history of connection with the city, with the African American community, through my ownership and running of the Braid Factory, I absolutely knew that this was a last straw event that was going to cataclysmically change the way our city reacted to and responded to issues like this. And so I felt that a platform like a congressional level race might give me the opportunity to speak frankly to that group of residents that would be so frustrated and disappointed and discouraged and hurt and just visibly traumatized by what they had to go through and what they had to witness. Because like every Black person in this city, I have my own traumatic experiences with the Minneapolis police. And anytime something happens, that comes up. You take that personally, because you have to look at a situation like that and say, that could have been me. That could have been my brother, my sister, any relative of mine. That could have been a customer at the Braid Factory. The Braid Factory is located just 8 blocks down the street on Chicago Avenue. We send customers up to Cup Foods for drinks and food for their family that's getting their hair braided all the time. George Floyd could have been anybody's dad, could have been somebody's brother, husband, coming up there to get food for everybody at the Braid Factory. It touched home for us the way it touched home for everybody around this city. And like you mentioned, Al, it touched home for people all over this country and all over the world. We had the opportunity to be interviewed around George Floyd Square from people from news crews from Finland, Norway, Japan, New Guinea, Chile, South Korea. I mean, literally all over the world, people were descending on George Floyd Square to try to find out more, to get more of the story, to get that local footage, because it played to everyone. It plays to every downtrodden and oppressed culture around the globe, and it still does. Eyes of the world are still on us.
Where were you as the incident was unfolding? And if you can recall, if you weren't in the neighborhood at the time, when this became an issue for you. You said the next day you went to register. So at what point in time, from when the time of the incident occurring, how did you become aware of it? And then what were your feelings as you were becoming aware first of what was going on?
Well, as a lot of people know, I'm not a social media guy. So I wouldn't have known about it except that people started calling me. First, it was people around the neighborhood. Mickey, did you hear about this? Mickey, do you know about this? Because, my house is only 8 blocks from George Floyd Square. And so at that time, because of COVID and because of, I have an elderly mother that I take care of, and I had been being very, very cautious, never to go outside without, the mask, the social distance. It was the whole parade for me. So I wasn't in a position to rush out there and be a part of the actual on the streets, on the scene acting. But I absolutely knew what the fallout was going to be. And by that evening, I was in contact with some members of a major state party, the Legal Marijuana Now Party, who had been reaching out to me for years to run for office, and letting them know that hey, tomorrow morning, I was telling them, I'm going to go register as a candidate. I'm going to use your party as the platform, as the sponsor, so that my name is on the ballot. I didn't have to go through a primary or anything like that. The Legal Marijuana Now Party is a major state party. That means that any politician running with their endorsement is automatically on the November ballot. You don't have to get signatures. You don't have to go through a primary or anything like that. And so I was using that opportunity to really present a platform, a stage from which I could speak directly to the people about local issues. You know, it's a United States Congress race, but I wasn't talking about peace in the Middle East. I wasn't talking about our trade war with China, which was an issue back then. I wasn't talking about the civil war in the Ukraine or immigration at the border. I was talking about local issues, how we can overcome what the fallout from the George Floyd murder. We didn't know it was, we couldn't call it murder back then because the guy hadn't been convicted, but what the fallout from that event was going to be. Because as somebody that's born and raised here and that has worked so closely within this community, if you couldn't see what was going to happen from that event, you really didn't deserve to be in politics or in leadership in this city, in my opinion, because it was clear to anybody on the ground, anybody that had a pinky finger dipped into community activism should have known what was going to happen, how the response from our community was going to be at a level that was, unprecedented. An accounting should have been made for the response and reaction from our community. But instead, if you remember, leaders just kind of closed their eyes. They held back. They didn't, they acted like they were surprised by it all. Space was not carved out. Opportunity to be heard was not made. We should have, as leaders of this city, we should have provided for the very extreme reaction that we should have anticipated from this event. And that would have made a big, big difference. If we had carved out spaces at 7, 8, 12 different parks, different locations, created stages, platforms, microphones, opportunities for people to step up and speak and be heard. If we would have provided more leadership right away, who knows how much of the devastating civil unrest we might have avoided? Maybe all of it.
When did this thing start blowing up in your memory? You said in the afternoon, people you knew started calling you, telling you what was going on. Did you become fully aware of what was happening by the evening news or by late night news? When describe the progression of awareness that you personally experienced. All of it, you said, led to your calling members of the Legalized Marijuana Now Party and telling them that you would find their platform, their organization as a platform to talk about what was going on right now unfolding. So what's the progression?
Yeah, I'd say, maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock, I got the first phone call from people. It was from people at the Braid Factory, actually.
And the incident happened at around, what, noon or 1 o'clock?
I think so. I think a couple hours earlier is when it had happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, one of those things where one call led to another call, and then you see something on the news, then you start to get breaking news on the radio, then every station is covering it. Then you start hearing helicopters, then you start hearing sirens, then you start hearing about things happening around your neighborhood. You started hearing about groups of people marching and walking and moving and activating and mobilizing.
As early as the afternoon? How soon?
Well, by that early that evening, by 6 or 7 o'clock, there were large groups of people that were really upset, that were really starting to take matters into their own hands. Yeah, absolutely. They were already on the move by 7, 8 o'clock, and it wasn't, it doesn't get dark. It was light at that time. Mm-hmm. So it was, they were out late, and a large group of people didn't go to sleep that night. A large group of people stayed out overnight that very first night because they wanted answers. And, of course, the way in Minneapolis works, you don't get immediate answers. That's one of the issues that is so critical to this entire conversation. is we talk about accountability, but what we're really talking about is swift accountability, immediate accountability. Because if you don't have immediate accountability, then you don't have accountability. Okay, what you have is a void of accountability. And within that void, that's when all the terrible things can happen. That's when rumors start. That's when bad things can happen, because you can present the attitude, oh, well, they're not doing anything about it. Oh, well, nothing's gonna happen to those guys. That's why real leadership involves not just these political catchphrases, accountability, but the truth, the reality of the need for immediate accountability. You have to be the type of leader that can say on day one, in hour one, okay, this is what we're going to do about these people. This is how we're going to react to this situation. This is how I'm going to respond at this moment in crisis, and give people some reassurance that you're there, that you understand what's happening on the ground, that you're aware and that you're prepared to do the right thing. You're not calculating the political fallout. You're not calculating the public response, or how are people going to react to what I say or what I do. You're not making calls to the governor or the attorney general. What should we say? You're not talking to your public relations director. You're responding immediately to the truth and reality on the ground. And that's the component that this city has missed for so long. We still have a police spokesman that will never do the job properly for our community. What we need is a community spokesman who can work in conjunction with the police to provide us real factual information that we trust, that we can count on, that comes directly to us because it's coming directly from us. And that's going to be something that's going to allow us to take a major leap in our community partnership with the public safety system going forward, because we just can't go back to these old 1950s model operational tactics that just provide cover for the police department, that provide sound bites that make people think we're putting it all to bed. Don't worry, it's all taken care of. That's not what the people want. It's 2021. We need to be thinking about a police department operation that's going to work for us today, and it's going to work for us 20 years from now, because it's forward thinking, it's adjustable, its standards are changing, they're acknowledging and recognizing that the times have changed, the demographics have changed, the population has changed, and we clearly are not going to accept the same old operations that we've accepted in the past. And the time for reimagining the way we do business in terms of our police department is now. And so I'm very hopeful. We've got a police chief for the first time in my history that's actually from our own community, who knows and cares about our community, who's committed to making the significant reforms. For the first time in a long time, about 15 years, we have a police union that's not being run by an obstructionist. I mean, Bob Kroll was bad for our city. He was bad for business. He was bad for the police department and the partnership idea that the police are supposed to work with our community. We've got a new union president who's using terms and words that I've never heard a union president use before: compromise, willingness, sacrifice. And I think it's somebody that we can work with. And on top of that, we have a united public. Not just the communities that are so directly affected, not just the Ward 9 and the Ward 5 communities that have to deal with 90+% of all the gun violence, but our entire city is united around the idea of positive change and improving our police department. And if we put all these elements together, I think we can move in the right direction. That's why I'm so hopeful. I'm optimistic that once we vote down this ballot initiative, we are going to move forward with ideas that transformatively change our police department. And what we come out on the other end with is going to be something we can all agree makes our city safer, more equitable. It's a better commitment between the police to our community, and a trust builder from our community for the police that allows us to solve crimes and prevent crimes and interact more proactively to prevent a lot of the things from happening in the first place.
I'm interested still, Mickey, in examining again and getting your recollection on what happened the night of the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. And so you said you take care of your mom at home in South Minneapolis. as the night wore on, what were you learning? Can you remember that? Just kind of how
Yeah,
things,
well, I mean,
the
I
state
think
of
everybody
things.
remembers it was the only story. I mean, whether it was local news or national news, I generally watch a lot of national coverage. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. It was the only story, and it was really not just headlining; it was in depth, and they were already sending. If
How
the
soon did
national
that, how
media
soon
knew
did the
enough.
tape get out? How soon? Do you remember? I can't remember how soon the video that the young lady shot
Oh, it was
that
out that afternoon.
that afternoon. So it was
Oh yeah.
already out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It
So that
was it
was
was it was out within moments of it happening. It was starting to spread because
okay.
it was one of these Facebook videos that it either goes live or it can go
Great.
live really quickly.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Okay.
and I'll be honest, I never watched that video
Mhm.
for my own reasons. I don't watch those kind of police videos that just too traumatizing. But I heard about it and it was described to me from people at the Braid Factory many, many times. I didn't have to watch it to know precisely what happened. Go ahead, Diana.
It actually came out on Snapchat first because that's where I seen it. And once it hits Snapchat, boom, it goes all over, and then you start seeing it all over Facebook.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
Okay.
not afraid to tell you I have no idea what Snapchat is. I'm always,
And neither do I. So
It's,
Diana
it's,
got
it's
us
if
hooked.
another
it was
one of those social
if it was up
medias.
to us, Al, we'd have to wait for the pictures to come out in
Snapchat
the
goes,
paper.
but see, Snapchat is like right away. That hits right away as soon as it's happening. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of, it's just a matter of time before these kind of things happen this way. This is the era that we live in now. Everybody's got their video cameras out. Everybody's got their phones ready to go at a moment's notice. And we're lucky in a sense that we haven't had a double up on this exact same thing because we obviously can't afford to have that happen to our city, but we see it already happening in other cities. And so it's a problem that absolutely has to be solved for once and forever so that people understand on both sides of this issue that this can't go on. The police understand what they're going to be held accountable for. And when we say accountable, we mean immediately accountable for with no reserves, okay, with no qualifications, with no qualified immunity to hide behind. Everybody has to understand. It's got to be a new era of understanding that we're going to do things differently going forward. And that's got to come from the highest levels of leadership. It would be great if we were able to pass that federal legislation, the George Floyd Policing Act, et cetera, et cetera. But our federal government is so dysfunctional. It actually makes our city government look like we know what we're doing. We can't rely on or expect even our state government has stalled out on the policing issue. We can't wait for or hope for some larger entity to come down and save everybody. We have to start right here in Minneapolis within our own communities, solving these problems on the ground for ourselves and hope that over time we can expand it to include everybody. But we have to start right now with our own police department, cleaning house, making the changes and upgrades that we need to be able to discipline and terminate bad officers and to be able to target, recruit, and hire those good officers who are from our community, who speak our languages, who reflect our diversity. We need more minorities. We need more women. We need more immigrant police officers to work the diverse communities of the Minneapolis wards. And we need to do it right away. It can't be something we wait for or talk about or discuss or plan on. We already know what the solutions are. What we're waiting on are professional, disciplined, and responsible leaders who can implement these good solutions and turn it into good public policy.
Do you know Chief Medaria Arredondo? He's about your age, I think, maybe a year or two older than you, but I'm not sure. Do you know him personally?
Well, it's funny that we do run in some of the same circles. I've had the great opportunity to meet and work with the chief over the last 10 months as I've been campaigning. But the chief, my godmother's family, the Belton family, is very close with the chief. And so we're just separated by 1 degree of people. He's about 6 or 7 years older than me, but he went to, Central High School right down the street from me in the 9th Ward. He graduated with people who are very, very close, personal family friends. And so we run in the same circles, but I don't want to try to pretend like the chief and I are close friends. but he's a great guy. I've had the opportunity to meet him personally on multiple occasions. He is incredibly responsive. I had a problem with a Ward 9 business. I called the chief's office within an hour. He had a solution laid out for them that attacked their problem directly and solved it within a couple of days. I mean, this was a school. It's a Spanish immersion school on Cedar Avenue, and they had drug deals and drug use. They were having to lock down their school 3 times a week, a preschool. These are little kids and mostly a female staff. They couldn't go outside to get in their parking lot because there were people out there using drugs, selling drugs. It was a serious problem. And they knew that I was a public safety first candidate. And they called me up and they said, Mickey, I don't know what you can do. I got right on it. I called the chief's office. And then that's the kind of cooperative partnership I'm talking about installing, because you can't just start at the bottom every time. Sometimes you got to let people know this is a big issue. It requires solutions. And when the chief says jump, he's got the support of his rank and file officers. 5 different lieutenants responded to his call for action. 5 different police lieutenants got back to us to say, how can we help? What can we do? Where do you need us to be? And we solved that problem in just a couple of days. Now, that's just one of many, many problems. But I think it's a process that we can repeat over and over again to solve all of our problems. And with more resources comes more opportunity to solve those problems. So we rebuild the 3rd Precinct Police Station. We reestablish those substations that you remember, Diana. We used to have those substations all over the place in the criminal hotspots. That's where you start your foot patrols. That's where you have your community policing aspects. I mean, there are solutions. Like I say, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We don't have to come up with something from ground level. A lot of the solutions already exist. What we lack in this city is the political will to do the right thing, to tell the truth about a situation and respond in truthful manners. A lot of times you hear people using political messaging to try to solve a public safety crisis. That doesn't work. Public safety and politics don't match. There's no connection there. Public safety issues require a public safety response and a public safety reaction. So, that's why I don't mind telling people we need more police. We need more police resources. And there might be people out there that don't want to hear it, but that's the truth. And most of the people on the ground, especially in the 9th Ward, understand and respect that to be the truth. We need more police accountability, more police reform, absolutely. But if we don't have the numbers, if we don't have the resources, if we don't have the operational capability, I mean, come on, what are we really going to accomplish?
We're winding down, Mickey. This has been a wonderful chance to spend a lot of good time with you. I thank you for number one, being a candidate, but also your availability and your willingness to lay out your point of view. I want to spend the last 8 or 9 minutes, and Diana, you might want to join with questions or comments or feelings. But 2 things. Talk about the city's budget and how financial strategies of the city, either positively or negatively, impact 9th Ward. What critique or praise or criticism do you have of the current operations and of the current budget? And know that the council doesn't set the budget, the mayor does, but the council influences that process. Secondly, I think there's still, and you mentioned this last time, but I'd be doing it again, do a synopsis of the 3 critical charter issues on the ballot. I think the more we share that and make that comfortable, accessible to ordinary people, the better we all are off as a citizen group. So talk about the budget first of all.
Well, the mayor just released his budget. I think it was $1.8 billion or something. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I'm very anxious to get my hands directly on some of that budget material, because we all know that there's a lot of waste in government, and we can see it with our own eyes when we see how they restructure. They do construction project, and 2 years later they're doing the same construction project again, and 2 years after that they're doing the same construction project. Some of it doesn't make any sense, and I don't know what's going on with the planning. I've been all around this world, Al, and I can tell you when other countries want to put in a new piece of freeway or a bridge, they get to it, they do it, and it's done. And it's done quickly, it's done effectively, it's done for all time, and it's done under budget, under time and under budget. That's the way other countries operate. So why America can't operate like that, why Minneapolis can't operate like that, I don't quite understand. But when we talk about our budget right now, we have to understand that we're under a lot of pressure. Half of our budget comes from property taxes, about half, and about half of our budget comes from those like luxury taxes, excise taxes, the kind of money that comes from the hotels, the events and entertainment centers of our downtown district. And that revenue stream has literally been cut off over the last 18 months. So the mayor had to put in a big property tax increase, over 5%, which is bigger than normal. As a homeowner, I hate to have the city budget balanced on the backs of the property owners, but at the same time, we really had no place to go to get the money that we needed, and to not present a budget with enough resources at a time like this when we really need resources was going to be a bad idea. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that our country is exceptionally wealthy. And so anytime a government starts talking or complaining about not having enough money, I am immediately going to be pushing back on that, because there's money in this city, in this county, in this state, and in this country to cover everybody's basic needs. And the fact that we have to go through with the kind of homelessness, the kind of lack of resources for drug and alcohol rehabilitation, the kind of lack of resources for specific communities like our Little Earth Housing Association, the fact that they use money as a reason to not support the East Phillips Urban Farm Initiative. Okay, that act, a lot of the people that voted on that voted against it. It came down to money. It was like $12 million. They're like, well, we don't know if you can raise $12 million. Don't make me, it's ridiculous. The fact that they have a budget that's so gigantic, and that all these critically important issues like George Floyd Square, like resolving and reimagining how we could have a better investment into George Floyd Square, comes down to a few $1 million. And just can't come up with it. They just can't see their way through to come up with the money to get something like that done, something that's going to transformatively change us going forward. Like you said, the world's eyes are on us. People are coming to our city from all over the world, and they end up having to stand in the street next to an abandoned gas station. We can't provide a comfortable, beautiful landmark and monument to collectively concern ourselves with the social justice implications that tragedy. I mean, that's an opportunity for us to take a real tragic event and turn it into a world triumph, something that's generationally affecting for both our city, our state, our country, and the world. And it's just another missed opportunity. Let me just talk briefly about those ballot initiatives, because I know we're running short.
Yep.
Number one ballot initiative is the government structure. Should Minneapolis have a strong mayor system where the mayor is like the executive director and the city council acts as like the legislative body? Or should we continue to have the same system we have where they all work together supposedly to kind of come up with answers to these problems? I support ballot initiative number one. I support the idea of a strong mayoral system. I'm sure everybody agrees that it would be best if our strong mayors occurred organically, because we had strong choices. We had strong candidates who went out into the community, developed a grassroots consensus of the electorate, and had a mandate to do the things that they understood the public wanted them to do, and responded positively in moments of crisis, and was really a champion of the public. We would all like to have a mayor like that. I think about Sharon Sells Belton and how popular she was. Mayor Don Frazier was popular like that too. We would all but we don't have the luxury in this city of waiting around for conditions to be perfect. We are in a crisis mode situation with too many real issues bubbling up and boiling over. And we have to take advantage of this opportunity we have. This will make our city stronger and more effective. And our city government is so ineffective and dysfunctional right now. We just can't let this opportunity pass. So I vote yes on ballot initiative number one to create the strong mayor option. Even though it lessens my power as a city council person, you have to do what's best for the city, not for what's best for yourself. You have to see that things are more important than just your own personal agenda. So vote yes on number one is my opinion. Number two is the public safety initiative. That's do we want to replace the Minneapolis Police Department with some fantasy idea of how something else without any details or descriptions of what that something else would be. I have from the very beginning been saying that we have to vote this initiative down, vote no on ballot initiative number 2. What you're starting to hear is a lot of the abolish, defund, dismantle candidates start to walk back their positions too. Even there was an op-ed in the Star and Tribune with one of the 5th Ward council people. I won't even say their name. Everybody knows who the 5th Ward councilman is.
Just say the name. Say the name.
It was. I think his dad is involved in politics.
Jeremiah Ellison.
He put out a thing. Now, this is one of the guys that was one of the key abolishers. We've got an abolisher in our ward race too. That's all about dismantling, defunding, getting rid of the police. I want to live in a world without police. And that message rang so flat with the people that they went and talked to that they're now reworking their websites, they're reworking their messages, and they're trying to come out as some kind of pro-public safety candidate. But we just need to keep our focus on the reality. There are people out there that have been supporting our police department the whole time, and there are people out there that really will stop at nothing to get rid of our police department. And you got to find out whose candidates are whose and make your choice based on that understanding. I support our police department. I support our chief. I support the idea of improving, upgrading, and making our police department better. So I say vote no on ballot initiative number 2. We don't need some brand new idea, some fantasy land idea of a police safety system. We need to improve our current police department, bring in more resources, hire more people, install more cameras with more oversight, more accountability, more transparency, and just an entire reform package that makes sense for everybody to rebuild the trust and confidence that our community can have that somebody's out there helping to protect and serve us. Number 3 is the rent stabilization package. A lot of people are calling it the rent control initiative. One thing I want to point out on this is that this is not an actual ballot initiative that changes anything. This is just a ballot initiative that gives the city council the opportunity, if they so choose, at some undescribed point in the future, to make a vote or make a change or make a policy that has some element of rent stabilization or rent control contained within it. It's a bad policy no matter how you cut it. And let me tell you why. We're in the midst of an affordable housing crisis in this city. It's not just a brand new thing. It's been trending this way for decades. And we have a problem with rents. Rents are way too high. They're out of control. Unfortunately, rent control policies don't solve that problem. Rent control policies actually limit the number of available affordable home units that are available now and get invested and developed in the future. So if we want to make the problem worse for future generations, then rent control is something that we might think about. But if we want to make the problem better, we need to recognize and attack the affordable housing crisis where it actually exists, and that is within the supply and demand dynamic. We need to vastly increase our supply of affordable housing while simultaneously lowering the demand of renting by transitioning more renters into home ownership. That's how you change the dynamic on the ground. That's how you create generational wealth that really affects not just families today, but in the future. That's how you shrink that gap between white home ownership and black home ownership. That's how you fundamentally and generationally change how we see renting and home ownership for our city, for our future. That's how you solve those problems. You get away from prioritizing renting the way our city has done for decades. Over 90% of all new development is rental development. We have to change that. We have to start developing real affordable housing options that people can buy into, that people can start establishing that kind of equity in their lives. And that kind of investment changes everything. It has an effect on our public safety. It has an effect on our education. It has an effect on our youth and our at-risk youth specifically. When we target our community development to those demographics that truly need it, we're affecting more than just housing. We're affecting the fundamental building blocks of a strong society and a strong community.
With that, we're out of time. Listen, Mickey, it's been wonderful. Diana, any final comments or questions or suggestions? I think you're muted. Yeah, but I see you shaking your head. Listen, Mickey, thank you. Let people know, I'm letting people know that tomorrow, my show at 1 o'clock on KFAI will be particularly interesting because I want to make it a 3-hour shift tomorrow. So I'm inviting you back, Mickey, and other candidates who've been on our Monday show regularly to join me over the course of 3 hours. And I want to take that actual broadcast time and social media time to go over the same territory we've gone over today and more, to bring a number of voices. And I'd love to invite you to bring your voice to the program tomorrow as well. It'll be a great conversation, adding the venue of broadcast radio to this conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you all. Join me tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Take care. Bye-bye.